Hi, everybody. Anthony Romeo here from WiseUP again, brought to you by Wise Components, wisecomponents.com, stocking distributor of Layer 1 infrastructure. We've been providing quality solutions since 1975. With WiseUP podcast, we've been educating and entertaining people for 3 seasons now, talking to intelligent manufacturers, service providers, bringing value, letting us understand what's going on behind the walls, above the ceilings that's making it all work. Do you hear me now? You've heard that commercial before, right? Today, we got a special guest. I say that every time, right? We have a special guest. So this man should have no problem talking. I've been having a blast having a conversation with Dave Donald, CI National Account Manager, coming to us today from Mesa, Arizona, from the WilsonPro company out of St. George, Utah. Dave, welcome to WiseUp. We appreciate you taking the time out of your hectic schedule. I know your travel schedule has been lessened, so we appreciate you educating us on what WilsonPro is bringing to the table from a passive DAS solution, or I should say distributed antenna system. For those of you listening to WiseUp, it could be heard on iTunes, Spotify, and Anchor. If you're listening to this on your phone, well, hopefully you got coverage, because WilsonPro can provide that coverage. So Dave, welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate it. This is a great opportunity.
So since everybody's been dealing with the lack of travel and trying to maintain productive, and gives me a reason to keep pants on, I started a podcast to ensure that we're continuing to educate our customers and people out there that are in the ICT community, the wireless community, anybody in facilities, contractors who turn in the screws and making it happen, so that people understand what is IoT, what is wireless. We hear all these commercials, 5G. I said it before. Do you hear me now? It's so critical. It's the network infrastructure, the wireless infrastructure that we take advantage in our everyday lives. This thing that I have here, this is my lifeline, right? I'm holding, for those of you who are not seeing this on our YouTube channel and listening to us on our podcast, I'm holding my cell phone. This is my main artery, just like so many. Gartner research has put out that 85% of all business calls are conducted utilizing a cell phone. Do you have good coverage in your home, in your resi condominium co-op development, or in your commercial office space? Well, listen today, because WilsonPro has a solution out there that's cost effective and scalable. So Dave, again, thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to join us. I got a couple of questions. WilsonPro, where'd you start? What's driving the business? What gets you out of bed and into that chair from across the hall? What's doing it?
Well, the company itself started over 50 years ago and got into the wireless business through ham radio. That's where Jim Wilson, for whom the company's named, began his entire career, was in ham radio, specifically in antenna design and that kind of thing. He rode that all the way through the CB wave that took place back in the 70s and early 80s, where he was designing boosters and antennas and whatnot to be able to create greater distance and so forth, the propagation of those signals and so forth. So that was really where he went until cellular became a reality. At which time, and at the beginning of the cellular business, first of all, not only were you paying $8 a minute to use a phone, but on top of all of that, the quality of the connection, because obviously the network of towers and whatnot was nowhere near what it is today, and the technology that was involved. I mean, you were fighting a battle to be able to get a connection. We all remember the brick phone. But we also remember the car phone that had this massive unit that sat in the trunk of the car, and then, of course, the handset that was up next to the the console in the front. You look back on that and you just laugh. And then we went from that all the way down till the phone was the size of a pen. It was all make it smaller and whatnot. And so all of these developments took place. And then, of course, yes, we got to here. Right. We got to a task-specific computer that we carry in our pocket. And I tell people this all the time. This is a miracle. Yeah. The fact that I can, with a press of a few buttons or with a voice command, access the entire Harvard Law Library, right?
Right.
If I want to know who the second baseman was on the 1942 Mets, I can pick it up on this device instantaneously. Seriously, I don't know what we did before having this in our hands. And it's so funny to be at the table at a restaurant and have somebody ask you a question and go, oh, well, let me find out. Yeah. Exactly. We used to use our brain for this. We used to actually have knowledge. And now, of course, it's all coalesced to here. But it is, you made the statement, it is an expectation now. It's not something that, I mean, we refer to it affectionately at Wilson, we refer to it as the fourth utility. You got power, water, and gas. You want to make sure that you've got cellular connectivity. And following right behind that is some type of network connection. It is something that is such high demand that without it, when it goes away, people begin to, emotionally invert. You know what I'm talking about? Exactly. The panic that takes place. Oh my gosh, leave your cell phone someplace. You leave that device somewhere. What does it do to you? That used to be your wallet. When you left your wallet somewhere, you got all panicked. Nowadays, you're in, like you said, you live on that device. And so having quality connectivity is just absolutely critical.
My phone is my wallet. It also starts my car. So I could open my house. I could control the temperature of my house. If I lose this thing, I am dead. Dead on arrival. And that's the majority. That's the norm.
Right. Well, listen, I'm old enough to remember when I had easily 100 phone numbers in my head.
Oh, yeah.
Seriously, you just kept them all there. I can barely tell you what my own phone number is today. Right. It's, you know what I'm saying? It is, and I don't even use I don't have to use my phone number, because if I contact you, if I get a hold of you, you know already who I am. You're looking directly at your phone and telling me that. So it's a very unique position to be in, and being in a business where our responsibility is to maintain that connection is so critical, because in the past, this just wasn't something that was important. And we're running into a lot of challenges that are being created by that demand. Congestion that's taking place, certainly the frustrations with multiple devices in a single location, things like that. It's a real challenge, and I'm grateful that we get to provide that service.
No, we've been hitting on a lot of things. What's the need, right? And you said it best, the fourth utility, right? We established that anybody that's listening to this podcast right now, WiseUP, is probably listening to it on their mobile device. So, could you imagine, going to work without your phone, or just doing, like you said, going to a restaurant when we used to go to restaurants on a more regular basis, having a conversation and not being able to answer those questions, instantaneously in a work environment? How critical is as we're on the go and we're doing it? And as I pointed out before, Gartner research has pointed out that 85% of business calls are conducted utilizing a smartphone. And they're not the brick anymore.
Imagine using it just for voice and not being able to instantaneously provide a document or a photograph or a graphic or a spreadsheet to someone while you're talking to them on the phone. Right. I'm sitting on the phone. Oh, wait a minute, I've got it right here. Here, I'll send that over to you. Take a look at it. My gosh, I remember when we were ecstatic by the fact that FedEx could get us a package in 2 days. And then we got a fax machine where we would have the ability to get the document, as long as we were near our fax machine, within minutes. Now it's absolutely instantaneous. I have to be able to show you right now.
Yeah, no, the instant gratification is with 1,000%, whatever it be, millennial generation, Gen Z, Gen X, the next generation to come. It's only going to get more intensified, right? So now that we established that it is not a want, but it is a need, deploying, what's the difference between a passive system like WilsonPro that provides versus an active distributed antenna system?
That's a great question. And most people don't. First of all, the great majority of the population doesn't even know that there is a distributed antenna system solution available. So active or passive, they just have no idea. As a matter of fact, one of the challenges we run into regularly is that a customer is told, they just bought their new $1,200 cell phone and it's not giving them the connection that they wanted. So the first thing they do, of course, is they call their carrier. And their carrier's response in most cases is, gosh, we're sorry, until we build another tower in your area, that's just what you're going to have to live with. And I run into this every single day because customers say, well, wait, I was already told there was no solution. Great, I understand. So the guy with the multi-million-dollar house that has taken advantage of every option they possibly can is standing in his driveway to make a phone call. And that's just, it doesn't make any sense. So
it's
the first thing
that's what it is.
Right. The first thing we want people to know is there is a solution. And now it comes your question about passive or active. A passive system means that we are taking the signal from an existing tower, and however weak it may be when it gets to the location, as long as there is some signal there to work with, we have the ability to amplify and then propagate that through multiple antennas inside of a building. That could be a home, that could be an office. It doesn't make any difference. And the difference between that and an active DAS system is that the active DAS is actually hardwired into the carrier. So whether it be Verizon or AT&T or T-Mobile or whoever it is, it's a direct connection to them. The biggest advantage to passive over active is cost. There is no question. And we're talking, 10 times multiples or more in the cost. And that's not to say that there isn't a place for active systems, because there are.
Let me ask you this, Steve. Let's just say somebody that's listening to this is in facilities, right, and is not able to understand, or not that there's not people in facilities that understand propagation of RF signal and coverage and whatnot, and how the carriers work from macro network or micro network, et cetera.
Right.
Is there a price per square foot calculation tool, or some ideas like, active DAS costs X amount per square foot deployed, and if not,
I would love to tell you that there is, but if I gave you that number, it would be
I'll have to be killed. I get it.
Well, it's so dependent. It's so dependent on so many factors.
Okay.
It's dependent upon the environment itself, the actual building materials that are used to create the building. It's going to depend on the available signal that's outside. It's going to depend, and that's going to be, there's a number of determinants for that, because you've got distance from the tower. You've got the actual landscape that you're dealing with. There's just too much of that to be able to throw a number at it. That's why I just used the example of like a 10 times multiple.
Right.
The other big advantage to this is the ease and speed of deployment. The fact that I can go into a 100,000 square foot facility, for example, and I can have that entire system deployed in literally a matter of days, sometimes even hours, depending on how that is set up.
Right.
The active DAS system could take a year or more, not only because of the actual effect of running the cable and doing all that kind of work, but all of the approvals and certifications that need to take place. And by the way, active is always done on a carrier by carrier basis. So you, in effect, if you were going to use all 4 carriers, you'd need to have a separate system for each one of the 4 carriers.
And just to point out, this is FCC approved, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
our relationship with both the FCC on one side and the carriers on the other side is the only thing that makes this work. Because without those relationships, first of all, they're both thrilled. They're both thrilled that we're there to solve a problem that they already have. There is no way in the world a carrier could possibly foresee all of the multiple of challenges that could exist with that single phone, because he doesn't know the environment. Here you go. You bought it, you take it, you walk out the door. Now what? They have no control over where you're going to use that. And if you live in a rural area where that's a frustration, or you live in a highly congested urban area where that's a problem, and you've got all kinds of blockage because of buildings and who knows what, they just can't foresee that. And so they are thrilled to allow us to be able to provide a solution for them. So now when that call comes in, hey, my system doesn't work, we have on a regular basis carriers referring people directly to us because, if you want a solution. I mean, it's just incredible to me, because once that solution becomes available, once an integrator, for example, gets a hold of that solution and becomes comfortable with it after a couple of installs and learns the ins and outs, my gosh, they're presenting it to every single client they deal with. In fact, many times before the building's even built, I've got situations, for example, where I'll have a demo system and I'll roll that demo system out to a job site because the general contractor is frustrated that he can't use his cell phone on the job site. And so one of my local guys will roll a demo system out there, a couple of tripods, set the system up and whatnot, and fire it up. And all of a sudden, not only the general, but every sub that's on the site can now make a phone call from there instead of leaving the site
You
to have to go make that phone call.
You become
hero and by the way,
instantaneously.
Do you think I have any trouble selling that system when the building's done? It's it's just a no-brainer. So
So
we do a lot of that kind of thing.
You know, besides when we talk about the fourth utility and it becoming not a want but a need, how does a building owner now go to their tenants, whether it be commercial or residential? Are they able to make money off of this system?
As far as charging the tenant for it?
Well,
in other words,
I would say this, because in building amenities, you look at whether it be LA or New York City, the high-rise luxury apartment buildings go for, a king's ransom, right? They're millions of dollars. But to your point you made before, you had the CEO on his driveway making the call. Do you want that same CEO that has a billion-dollar apartment or multi-million-dollar apartment going outside to make a call when his apartment's 30 stories up?
That's
so
right. Exactly.
This is, to me, I would think that this is something that could be marketed to the business, to the developers, to say, hey, we have great cell coverage in our building. So
well, and that's funny you mentioned that, because a lack of cell coverage in many states can lead to a legal action to be able to break a lease.
Really?
So you think about that. You think about that in an MDU, where an individual, the developer is putting this thing together. Half of the units are being sold, the other half of them are being leased, and all of a sudden you're in a situation where the leaseholder is saying, "Wait a minute, if I can't make calls from within this unit, I'm out of here." And it becomes a valid reason to be able to break a lease. Oh, I'm telling you, the MDU developers that have jumped on that and said, no, we're not going to fall into that trap. And so we end up going that way. But literally, it's come down to situations where the individuals that are involved are walking the units before they buy or before they lease with their cell phone. It's one of the first things they do is grab their cell phone out to make sure that they can make a call. Because you've already determined that it's an essential. What are you going to do, if you don't have that capability?
So with something that's in front of everybody's mind right now, is we're going through a global pandemic. No matter what country you're in, COVID has said to 180 countries worldwide, and it's an awful thing. But business has to get open and things have to get back to somewhat normal. As partitions and segmentations of commercial space continue to go up, do you see that impeding on the frequency that's already deployed with an existing active or passive system? And can your company come to solve if that's something that needs to be solved?
Okay, let me ask you the question. So what you're talking about is physical partitions of facilities that are causing problems. There is no question.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, talking to a lot of building owners, they to get people back into their commercial space, what they've been doing is they've been fitting out the offices. Right before this happened, everybody out there that's working in a Google type space, everything is an open floor concept. But now the spread of germs became conscious in everybody's mind. So those ping pong tables and rock climbing walls didn't seem that attractive anymore. So now you have to take all those things that are common areas and split them and divide them. So go back to the 1980s where everybody had high top cubicles and corner offices and smaller offices and segmented all that space. So now you're putting up wood, sheetrock, and insulation, and it's in an existing building that already has a distributed antenna system, can your company
Mhm.
come in there and add value on an existing, if there was some signal degradation?
Well, if you're talking about the building materials themselves being the restriction, in other words, if you went to that position where that were the case, certainly we could have that effect, because in those situations, you're talking about merely scaling a system that already exists. In other words, if the amount of signal that I have is unable to penetrate the new obstructions that have been put in place, then yes, it's not a matter of just turning a big volume knob and
Right.
dialing the thing up.
No,
But you certainly,
yeah.
yes. I mean, I've gone into situations where a warehouse, for example, was turned into a series of offices, and there may be 60 offices in there, and every one of these is done in metal studs. It's done in drywall or some type of substrate material and whatnot, and it's all drop ceiling, and they've done that kind of work. Yes, it is much more difficult to cover that area than it was a huge open warehouse space.
Right.
So what ends up happening is you end up redesigning the system and saying, what is the parameter that you need? You may need an antenna for every 4 offices, for example. And the scalability of that, absolutely. We do that all the time, is
Right.
we take it from a single amplifier and a few antennas to a system that may have 60 or 80 antennas in it and multiple amplifiers to make that viable. And in some situations, that means additional donor antennas up on the roof. I mean, there's any number of things that could affect that, but that all takes place in system design.
Right, it's not one size.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to, put you in the corner and say it's one size fits all. That's not what I was getting at. But so you answered my
But you
question.
certainly can.
Yeah. Talk to us about WilsonPro's approach to the 5G craze. I mean, everybody's talking about 5G, 5G, and we both know that 5G is not fully, ready.
Well, I don't want to pop anybody's bubble, but all the 5G that you're using today is taking place on 4G LTE bands, with the exception of T-Mobile, who's using band 71 now, and AT&T's got something up at 2600. You're still operating on 4G LTE bands, and that low band is not giving you any dramatic increase in speed. And by the way, when we talk increase in speed, we're not talking voice. Voice is going to run on 4G LED or LTE for probably the next 20 or 30 years. I mean, it doesn't, because you don't need speed for voice. What you need it for is if you want to increase data speed. But then we get to the question of, what do we need the increased speed for? What is it going to be used for? There's a couple of things there. Right now, everything on 4G LTE, that's just the way it is. If you're going to go to 5G and you're going to go to millimeter wave, which is the big jump everybody's looking for, there you could feasibly increase the speed 100 times. That's not 100%, 100 times the speed.
Wow.
And the density of data is infinitely more than it would be if you were using regular 4G LTE. That is absolutely the case. However, there are some caveats there. As far as penetration of 5G millimeter wave, not only can it not get into a building, in most cases, it can't even get through a piece of paper. So the penetration factor, once again, you have to go back to exactly the kind of system we offer, which is an exterior antenna, an amplifier inside, and an antenna inside. And that, by the way, is the simplicity of the system. It's antenna, amplifier, antenna. Everything, even the most complex system beyond that, is nothing more than scaling that exact concept. Exterior antenna, interior amplifier, and interior antenna. So if we go to 5G millimeter wave, if that becomes the reality, it's going to require an exterior antenna, because you're not going to get any penetration into the building. Second thing is, right now, the furthest that Verizon, who is at the top of their game on this, is able to transmit 5G millimeter wave in open air is about 300 feet.
And we're talking with Dave from WilsonPro. Dave is just elaborating on the 5G application that WilsonPro has. Dave, as you were just going into great lengths and details, what the 5G explosion or the theory of 5G is about, but it's really, there's a multitude of things going on that's not everybody's going to be utilizing the 5G platform, but you're ready. The bottom line is WilsonPro is ready to go, folks.
Absolutely.
That's it. That's a wrap.
Yeah.
Dave, when you're talking about the 5G network, it's not really for voice, as you pointed out. It's more on the massive amount of data, or is that a collective
Yes,
of
well,
both?
when we're talking about millimeter wave. The current 5G that we're using, like I said, is all happening on 4G LTE bands. So it's both voice and data. As we move forward, voice will stay on 4G LTE. Data will go to millimeter wave when that becomes available. Once again, as our engineers have said on more than one occasion, it's kind of an answer to a question that nobody has asked. All that speed is going to be available. Will there be applications that will be designed to take advantage of that? No question. But there's nothing today that's out there that needs that. So we're kind of cart before the horse type of thing, making a decision.
Right.
Most of what we hear about 5G's marketing hype, and that I understand. You know, you got people out there trying to sell new phones. I get it, but
they're $1,200. You know, they're $1,200, so you got to get a new phone.
Thank you very much. Yes.
So I mean, if folks, if you're still out there listening, what Dave is talking about from WilsonPro, you know, so providing solutions for small commercial offices to large facilities of all types and shapes and sizes. This is a U.S.-based manufacturing company for over 50 years. And as I pointed out before, they're 5G ready, and they're providing this services to major brands, places that you have either utilized their services like Microsoft, or you've shopped in and had the Swedish meatballs at IKEA. You know you have. Might have stayed in a Marriott when the restrictions were not on, and I know I do shop at Whole Foods. So they're helping in a lot of different venues, and thanks to WilsonPro, you're able to use your phone when you're shopping in these places. So Dave, how easy is it? Like I want to call Wise Components and buy a WilsonPro. You know, how do we go about it?
Well, the system itself is very simplistic. As I mentioned, it's an antenna, a donor antenna that's outside, an amplifier that's inside, and then antenna or antennas that are going to be inside to be able to propagate the system throughout. It is, I don't want anybody to be afraid of the learning curve, because it is very, very simplistic. There's only a couple of things that we need to know. We need to know what kind of signal we're starting with outside. We need to know the size of the building, the facility itself, and the building materials that are being used, so that we've got an idea of the kinds of obstructions we're going to run into. And then we need to design the system for that, a design that we ourselves will provide. If anybody has any questions about design, they can call us directly, and we can help design the system, provide a bill of materials and whatnot, at which they can go back to Wise Components and purchase whatever they need in order to be able to fulfill that. And then there's the installation itself, and then of course fine-tuning the system once it's all installed. It is not that difficult, and I have so many people who have put their first system in and then come back scratching their heads and saying, I don't get what all the fuss is about. This was incredibly simplistic. And I laugh. I said, yeah, I've been telling you that for 2 years, and now that you've done one, that's the exciting thing for me, because I believe firmly in being able to do well while doing good. And in this case, this is truly a service that is absolutely in demand from people who don't even know there's a solution. And when you give it to them, I'm telling you, as an integrator, you're putting smiles on people's faces.
It's a utility, as you pointed out earlier in the show. That's what it is. It's not a want, it's a need. You need to use your phone. If you can go a whole day without using your cell phone, you're a much better person than I. But I cannot hold a conversation without my cell phone in hand. Because I'm not that smart. So I'm constantly Googling stuff or searching on other search engines, but mostly Google. But in any case, you know, I appreciate you taking the time today to come out and talk with us about WilsonPro. Again, a 50-year-old company that's bringing value. If you're in facilities, in engineering, if you're just somebody that needs to use your cell phone and you're in a high-rise building, a commercial office, you need to talk. So
absolutely,
you know, you need your cell phone. It's a necessity of life. It's a way of life. So again, folks, I'm Anthony Romeo. This is WiseUP. We've wasted enough of your time, and thanks again for listening to us, Dave, Donald. CI National Account Manager from WilsonPro. So I thank you, sir, for joining us again.
You got it. Thank you very much. Just so you know, WilsonElectronics.com. Wilson Pro is the pro division. WeBoost is the consumer division. But WilsonElectronics.com if they want to go look at any of this information on the web, they can.
No, that's terrific. And all that information and everything that we talked about today will be in our show notes. So be sure to check out the show notes. You can also check us out on the web, WiseComponents.com. We highlight the manufacturers that we've had on our shows, but also our LinkedIn page, as well as our YouTube channel. So you get to see my ugly mug and hear from me as well. So again, thank you for everybody that listened to us on iTunes or Spotify or Anchor or however you're listening, but you're probably listening to it on a cell phone. So if you're in a bad area, bad connection, contact us and we'll get you the Wilson that you need. So Dave, thanks again.
My pleasure.
It's been a pleasure.